Hello, everyone. Welcome to Psychology and Spirituality, a program that we have been conducting for over 3 years now, where we try to bridge spirituality with psychology as a way for us to better live our lives. Today, we have a very special guest, one that you know very well as our co host, Marcia Trajano, and we are going to be talking to her about a very interesting topic today. Very, I think, inspiring, intriguing, and I'm sure she has a lot to share with us in terms of her experiences and give us a lot of food for thoughts. So, welcome, Marcia, to Psychology and Spirituality.
Thank you. I feel that we flipped I flipped the script today, right, Jussara? It is so good to be here. I appreciate you thinking of me as the person to talk a little bit about this topic, right? Which is quite an interesting one.
Yes, the topic that we are going to be talking today is the laws of work, role, and status. So I want to start this conversation actually maybe being a little bit naughty because I'm going to ask you something. Who are you, Marcia?
Oh, you got me. Who am I? And as you say that, immediately I think about the little book. I think he wrote in the 40s, perhaps, or early 50s. Saint-Exupéry, who wrote The Little Prince, my favorite book of all times. That many people think it is a children's story, right, Josiah? But it is quite insightful. And he asks that as the story of this little boy. Who are you? And you identify, as he talks about it, individuals will talk about, oh, I'm an astronaut, oh, I'm a writer, I am an engineer, whatever, which is brings the notion of that's not who you are, but what do you do? And this really poses a very interesting topic for us to start today is how do you, first of all, identify who you are? Is it a gender? Is it an age? Is it a nationality, a belief system, right? I could say I'm a Marcia, my name that was given to me during this incarnation, by the way. I have this female physical body. I am quite old, but anyways, that's besides the point. And beyond that, I have been in the past majority of my life now employed as a program manager, right? And we usually say, I just mentioned that to someone who was talking to me earlier today, just out of just happenstance, talking about all this forms and this, and you have to self-identify. Who are you? And I go, well, today I am. What's my title? Da 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 da. And that certainly does not describe who I am. It describes those activities that I do on a day-to-day basis. So back to you. What else? What can I say?
Actually the idea, this, tricky question
Yeah,
in terms
yeah.
of how much it is so hard for us to present ourselves to others.
Yeah.
We live more in the ego, more in the ego. We put
Mhm.
ourselves to present ourselves with a persona. We dress. Let's say we cover ourselves with the titles that we have, or
Yeah.
you know, accolades, like you said, but not very often we are talking really about ourselves. And but
Mm.
since the topic today is actually to address work, and especially the laws of work, role, and status that can come in so many different uh, instances of life.
Mhm.
We wanted, if it could be possible for you
Mhm.
to reflect here with us and all the audience a little bit about what does it mean to you. You mentioned that actually you're not quite old, but of course you are getting into that point in life that either you are going to have to take the decision yourself, or you will be politely uh,
Mhm.
taking to the road of retirement. And
Yeah,
how does it work? Because I know you, Marcia, and like there are many people that will be listening to us,
yeah,
whatever your profession, your work,
yeah,
if you reach a certain point in life, working and doing this and that, of course, you have accumulated a huge baggage. And it comes a point that you have to go through this transition. What
yes,
does it mean to you? Have you ever experienced that previously in your life? Because, of
yeah,
course, when we talk about the loss of work, is not necessarily just with age. It can be something that you're fired, or something that,
yeah.
or you decide to leave a job to look for other possibilities, to return to study, to move to another country. So tell us
Mhm.
about some of the stuff
Yeah,
and
yeah. So really, I appreciate that because I think it's important to me. So I am going to tell Jussara, you know this, but I often call myself a recovering workaholic. And you may want to say, why? Why do you say that? Well, if I look at my journey as an independent woman. And what I mean by that is no longer living with my parents, now graduating from college. And as an immigrant, I came to the US. I born in Brazil, came to the US when I was in my early 20s and started forging with my own hands my path, right? My education against opportunity. This is nothing new. Most of us will have to go through. And how does it mean to those iterative, if you will, topics, opportunities that start to forge that semblance of an identity. This is what I am. No, this is what I do. But we get embroiled into that. But your question about how have I dealt with it? I, as a workaholic, we think about this feeding. One thing feeds the other, right, Josada? So you work hard because you live in a different country. You don't have any safety net, if you will, not at that age. And the more you work, the more you are recognized, the more you are promoted and you grow. And the more you grow, you make more money. The more money you make, you want to make more money. And it's that vicious circle of the more you do, the more you do, to the point that you descend upon usually midlife crisis, right? For most of us, to a point that, yes, and I'm thinking here, I always think of Jung's the triangle, right, where the first part of your ascent is that would be our climax, the peak of our growth from a material perspective, and from that egocentric perspective, we keep doing or creating persona or personas to meet the demands of the world. So while I was born in another country, I came here, became a mother, and all of it was my activities, really, my workaholism was to meet the demands of this external environment, the world out there, if you will. And at some point, we have our crisis that could be what, right, Josad? It could be, you mentioned a few. I decided, oh, this is not sustainable. I'm going to stop. I'm going to go and do, I don't know, a degree in a different area, or I'm going to decide to stay home, take care of my parents, or take care of my children, or I get divorced. I don't know. There's so many different examples to include a difficult as it may be, some diseases that stop, they stop this ascent and pushes us to drop, if you will, to rethink our entire journey. Once upon a time, Jusada, and I was talking at the sea level. It was women in technology topic in this forum of CIOs, right? So chief information officers that happened to all be women, and they mentioned the biggest topic of all found in that forum was the fact that many, many, many women went into this ladder, quite vertical ladder, and they climb and they climb and they climb, and they say their words, they climb all the way up, and they see themselves they were climbing the wrong wall. And I love that metaphor, right? They like, what is this? I'm here. I harness everything you can ever want, but I don't find what is in there, right? So, from that perspective, and I go back to Jung's model, right? That trajectory going down now, it's a beautiful journey. We talked about this before, but the journey of true individuation through no longer the creation persona, which was the first prong of that triangle, but descent through authenticity, humility, and finding your true self. To go back to what you asked me to begin with, who are you? I don't know yet. I'm descending. I'm not there yet, Jussara. But I'll tell you in about maybe 20 years, when I'll be able to really get into a deeper journey. And I'm saying this thinking of Joanna de Ângelis in her book, Self Discovery. That is a beautiful, beautiful book, in the courageous journey that we all should take on going inside of us and finding our true self, right? Our true legacy, which is not in how much money you made, how many, I don't know, degrees you've amassed, how many roles and higher roles, or um, influence, number of clicks, number of followers, number of whatever quantitative aspect to see who you are based on those external points that validate who we are and how we do it, to this is what I truly am here to be, right, Jussara? I don't know. I went a lot all over the place. How did I answer your question?
Okay, the question has so many implications, you
Yes.
see, and I think you answered beautifully and brought so many other topics as well. And especially when we talk really about the name of this podcast, so psychology and spirituality, how important it is for us in each and every phase of our lives, for us to have a more spiritual take of life. Because
Yes.
even when we talk about the pyramid and the ascending or
Yeah.
descending, the descending will have a very heavy connotation for us, because it seems now I'm on the way to failure. Now I'm on the way to oblivion. Whatever I
Yes.
had to conquer, it's up
Yeah.
to a certain point in my life, up to a certain age, a certain position,
Yeah.
a certain social status,
Yeah.
role that I may have. And of course, we know that we all go through that in different circumstances, even when we are not talking about career here. We may be talking about, I'm married to a very big deal politician, and all of
Yeah.
a sudden, politicians may be up or down.
Yeah.
All of a
Absolutely.
sudden, maybe it's not even you directly that is going to lose the position, but you lose the position through others. Or, when you have children and they grow up and, move away,
Yeah.
they go to college, they go deal with their own lives, and then you say, well, I'm a mother, a father, what am I now?
Yeah.
All those
Yeah.
situations, I think,
Yeah.
um, the idea here is really for us to find mechanisms and to be very true to ourselves on
Yeah.
how to cope with all that, and how
Yeah.
should one be addressing this when time comes.
Yeah.
Uh,
And it will come, right, Josara? Regardless of what stage in life we are, and this series of podcasts have been really about grief and loss, but
mhm.
how do we manage loss? But go ahead.
Yes, and absolutely, and in these circumstances, I mean, being really true to ourselves, even if we are not, if we are saying, "Listen, I'm in the process,
Yeah,
but I know that this and that is how should I identify myself
yeah,
or the
yeah.
path that I should be taking." And so I wanted to hear a little more about this, from you, if you would.
Yeah, yeah. So the first thing that comes to my mind again is, right, for decades in my case, uh, I have built Marcia's career. And anyone, you can go look me up, LinkedIn, it's all there, very transparent. And the first thing you're going to say is like, what? It does not make sense, Marcia. I did not do like those CIO women, CIOs that went into one wall, grow into that very vertical ladder. Mine was really all over the place, and but yet it is my career. And in the process, we have education, we have certifications, we have titles, we may even have recognition. I'm talking about broadly speaking. And as a result, to me and to many, many of us, our work, generically speak, easily becomes our identity, right? And the reason behind, of course, society applauds. And I think, Jussara, the idea here is while um, society applauds productivity or efficiencies or achievement, influence, whatever, there will be a point that our ability to maintain, sustain, or be relevant in those terms, on those terms, become dim or dimmer by the minute, right? And let's say retirement comes, or a job ends, or a new technology, artificial intelligence, for it's the word of the day, right? Artificial intelligence comes and upends everything we have known. And the question to me, and I'm sure to many of us, is who am I? You pose that question, but who am I if I'm no longer productive? And so from that perspective, Jusada, whew, it is really a almost a collapse, right, of identity. And from a psychology perspective, and we know spiritually as well, we start to see something that is the opposite of that, which is an um, I would love to talk a little bit about Gustav Jung, right? Because Jung also mentions this, which is when you get to the top of the pyramid and start to go down, this is, he says, our best years, right? This is when a true transformation of our identity starts to occur. This is when we start to go inward instead of outward to see who, what is our true north, what is our calling, what is a true legacy. So I think understanding that transition and the grief, the sense of loss that comes when we go from one journey to the other, is a really interesting one to talk about it. So what brings to mind when I talk about Jung, beyond the model that he so famously created to us, but some of the things that speaks to me, and I'd love to hear your thoughts as well, is the sense that our identity is really, spoiler alert here, I'm always thinking of Anai, who loves to talk about movies, but spoiler alert, you are more than what you do, more than a role, more than a title, right? And Gustav Jung, I don't know if you know, I know you know Gustav, but everybody else here, but Gustav Jung, at some point in his beautiful career, he calls it the in the period that he actually, after he broke up with Sigmund Freud, he actually almost went into a collapse, right? He calls that confrontation with the unconscious years, where he became depressed, right? He was quite anxious. He, in some cases, he was considered near suicidal, despair, all of it, and he went into this period of going inward and disrupted his entire life, his entire career, and this crisis disrupted, yes, his work as it was. He withdrew, in his case, from public life, right? He withdrew from his clinical practice. But boy, we would be terrible without that. All of us who received the work, the result of the work that came afterwards, right? Because at that point, it became the turning point for him to go through his anxiety, through his depression, through his question everything he's ever done, but deep, deep sense of self-exploration, right? He started journaling, and that led to the red book, I believe. He used imagination. He developed so many of the theories that we inherited as his true legacy. He expended all of it, but he had to lose it all. He had to lose his position as a professor, as a clinician, etc., etc., which leads to us, what are we going to do when whatever is the impetus to lead us to the crisis that will stop our journey? And it can be painful, right? Physical, emotional pain. And how can we best, I think that was the question that you posed, how can we best prepare for that? And I think for me, and I'm speaking about myself, it is understanding um, the finality of a cycle, no matter how painful it is, Jussara, that the cycle ends so a new cycle can begin, right? And it's really interesting. I think I mentioned to you previously that long ago and far away, my career went to many restarts, but I was the peak of an old career, and um, I went through divorce, and my mind was not doing so well, and I left. I left completely. I was the peak of the peak of the peak. It was the best I've ever done, and I just said goodbye. And I remember actually going to the bank and having to do a form and says, "What is your profession?" And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I'm unemployed." How do you reconcile going from VP of something to unemployed? It doesn't matter that I did it, right? But that was a moment of recognition. How labels carry such an important meaning to us unconsciously. And how can we say it's just a job, it's just a title? Let's move on and move on this beautiful journey, which is the journey of the spirit that is here to grow and to be, to really harness all the inside out, all the sacred that exists within us, the divine that exists within us, right? Yeah, go ahead.
And judgment can be hard, right? I mean, I think that this is one of the things that Joanna de Ângelis in her books, she invites us to do is to go through a new paradigm,
Yes.
right? I was just thinking while we were talking, my sister, she retired very early. I mean, because there was a possibility for her to do that, so she retired very early, and her son and daughter only had children, at normal age, we would say
Mhm.
decades ago, a bit later, but now we will say normal age, like mid 30s or something. So I was thinking, her oldest grandchild never knew her as a professional.
Absolutely.
She
Uh-huh.
was, she really had quite a career in law, working for the government, and she had a beautiful career. She conquered a beautiful career, and thanks to that, she has a very, uh, organized retirement, but all of a sudden, what do? I'm retired. Uh,
Yeah.
I'm unemployed. Uh,
Yes.
uh,
Yeah.
so this paradigm that I'm saying, now you are invited to retire at the age, mostly at the age of 60, but we live to 100. So if
Yes.
you think about it, you have 40 years to do something. So, what would it be, perhaps, your recommendation
Yeah.
for these people, for everyone, not these people, us, all of
Yeah.
us, they are perhaps living the the market, the professional market of what
Yeah.
we consider one being employed, to all of a sudden, what am I going to do? Am I still useful? Do my life
Yeah.
still have meaning?
Yeah.
And how do you imagine this transition? And if there is something that you could even give us an advice, because like we were saying at the beginning, you are
Yeah.
faster approaching this.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Even from your perspective, what do you intend to do? And from a spiritual perspective, which is our aim here, will you think that you have no meaning after
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. And I think and you may be, in sync with me in those thoughts that it's almost like the end of the professional life requires us to be prepared to do an emotional shift. And it goes at the core, the grieving process, almost like bereavement, right? We lost part of ourselves, and that is true, but it is how to become okay with the idea of being replaced, right? In some cases, in other cases of becoming invisible, because after my name, which is a formal material attribute of my spirit, doesn't matter, but it's my name. There is a comma in a title, and when that title is gone, now I become invisible. And at the same time, I no longer have a sense of belonging, right, Jussara? And I watch the world, and the world will continue without me. How could you? You had to stop. You had to be destroyed without me, which is our egoic sense or self-centered egocentric way of looking at the world. That nothing will happen unless I am part of it, which is really interesting when you listen to those voices, and we need to silence them to perhaps, and of course I'm speaking metaphorically here, to have new voices taking those places, right? So while we say during this time, saying goodbye to a job, to a position, to a role, you may be confronted with the harsh feeling of no longer belonging and having to hear, have I been erased? Right? But knowing that this is really a reaction of my ego, of course I have not been erased, but then are we open to allow the silence that stays to reveal our true sense of self, right? Just sort of our true calling, our true legacy. In this case of Carl Gustav Jung, he did, but what about us? Right? What is the silence that we need? That incubation, that moment of another person that I'm reminded just now is Saint Francis of Assisi, right? Saint Francis, who went through a period of depression and then comes out of that and becomes that amazing saint, that amazing man that we all know and value. So, what is the in how it is that the moment of silence for us to look for what was success before and what should be success like when you remove the trappings of a material life, right? What is that society is calling us to do, and what is I connected to the divine within, am calling of myself. And what is this new voice, the voice of each one of us, that is a very quiet, subdued inner calling, but it is what is that I do. And I think the one thing that I wanted to perhaps bring before you move to a different subject is the idea that Joanna de Ângelis, right? And she writes about this in so many different books. It's the paradigm of shifting, having to being. And I'd say, well, in some books she goes like, "Who you are?" First question you ask me, right? Who am I? To what do I do? And I again go back to the Little Prince. What do you do? And then in a society that is largely, and we're talking about Western society, capitalist, materialistic, and consumerist society, then it's the question of having, right? What do I have? To what maybe in the past 20 years, Jussara, is the society of what do I look to be, because of social media and the whole phenomenon of having to be the influencer, the voice that everybody wants to hear. But back to the having instead of being, and I think you're going there. There's a sense of being productive, right? And if I no longer imparting of a part of that producing society, I'm no longer necessary. Kill me, right? You're no longer producing. And I think it's important that we, and I'm now talking about my own journey, is that maybe we can talk about if you want to do something, let's think about listening to our inner voice, but also listen to what can I and how can I serve, right? We talk about in my line of work in management, Jussara, we talk a lot about different types of leadership, and one that is my very favorite one, and that's my own personal bias, but is when we start to see servant leaders, we start to see true leadership. So let's ask ourselves, how can I be that servant leader? Meaning, how can I serve? And I can serve every day, right? I can formally serve in, I don't know, community service, mentoring those that need volunteering, guiding this entire new generation out there, share the wisdom that we all have amassed through a certain number of decades working and learning, not just working. So I think it's interesting when Joanna proposes that the loss of social roles is truly actually a beautiful new invitation, right? Which is one to be our true selves finally, and be our true self while we become part of this true network of all of us are part of this beautiful experience that is life. So maybe I could love to hear from you. What do you think would be perhaps the counter points between being and having? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think you gave a beautiful example when you mentioned Francis of Assisi, because
Mhm,
he had an incredible position uh,
mhm.
in life in the city of Assisi, where his father was a prominent entrepreneur, if I can say
Yes,
that,
yeah,
merchant, right?
yeah.
And had all the business. He had a very good social standard, and you mean he went to the Crusades, to war, to see if he was going to be knighted. He was after all the things that his youth and the values of the time. But all of a sudden, when remarkably, he was very young, but it went to trauma, went
Yeah,
an invitation to reflect upon the real values of life. And I think that when we are talking about this, the loss of work, or the moment that we have to step out, leave the stage, and the curtain will fall, and not meaning us deceasing, but us stopping playing the role that we were playing. I think he went through this realization, and he reinvented himself, and he went
Yeah.
completely opposite to what
Yeah.
was expected from him, and even what he was envisioning for himself according to how he was brought up. And I think we all go through those stages of life. And
Yeah.
in my way of viewing things, and the spiritual way, and the works of Joanna de Ângelis, like we are saying, we are constantly reminded to, pay attention to what is really valuable in life. We are not
Yeah.
saying that your work, your position, your status, your roles are not important, but they serve a purpose in a certain phase of your life. Then we will be invited to live something different, to go through different things. And sometimes it may feel like the end of the world. Who am I?
Yeah.
What am I going to do now? No
Yeah.
one will know that I once was this or that. My family will, my young people in my family will not, nephews
Yeah.
or grandchildren will not know what I did and how I impact the world. And the vision that I have is like, is
Yeah.
when you planted a tree, uh,
Yeah.
you may not follow the whole development of the tree. You're you're there until the moment it needs attention, or you can give this attention, but then
Yeah.
you have to step away, and the tree that you contributed in the world will be the basis for everything else. So
Yes.
everything that you brought will be the basis for everything else. And when we were thinking about this conversation, this podcast of ours today, there was a name that came to my mind that I told you about.
Yeah.
Um, he was an English theologian, philosopher, reformer, in Oxford, John Wycliffe.
Yes.
And he was basically the precursor of the Protestant Reformation. And of course, he was being a teacher at the University of Oxford, and with the young minds, he was always steering those young minds to,
Mm.
reflect about things, questioning things, go with the reason. And of course, he started being not very well accepted by the clergy, especially the Pope at the time. And it came to a point in his life that he had to, well, he was actually fired from his
Yeah.
position.
Yeah.
He had a certain age, of course. So at this point, he was married, and he said, "This is the end of my life. This is the end of my career. This is the end of my legacy."
Hmm.
And then he went with his wife to live in the countryside of England. And all of a sudden, he had an idea, because it was according to his Reformation, to start a group, because it was not only him that did that, to translate the Bible. And it was for the first time that we had the Bible from Latin to
Yeah.
English. And now, if we talk about his name, what he's known for, he's known, he became known as the Wycliffe Bible, the works
Yeah.
that he did. Not the professor, not the one that influenced the youngster minds. No, it was when he said, "I'm nobody now. I cannot possibly give any more contributions to the world." And so
Yeah.
I think one thing that is important for us to reflect is that if you have knowledge, if you have goodwill, if you have expertise, and you
Hmm.
no longer serve the material markets of life, go and help an organization.
Yeah. Yeah.
So many organizations that they starve for this kind of knowledge and experience that someone recently left the market,
Yeah.
the professional market, so to say,
Yeah.
can bring contribution to. What do you say about all that?
I know, I love it. There's a book out there. It's a business book, by the way. It's called Deep Work. That, as you're talking about John Wycliffe, as you said, like nobody remember what he did in the classroom. It is what happened when he left what he had, you know, spent most of his life, that it became his legacy. And I think what brought to my mind was in this book called Deep Work. I believe the author is Newport. He actually talks about Carl Gustav Jung, and he discusses the fact that, number one, we are a very distracted society, right? We talked about this before, Jussara, but sometimes we need to move away all the distraction, all the cognitively demanding tasks that we do during our professional lives, to then start to do something that will be your true legacy, that requires a higher level of quality of work. And it's really linked to your personal growth. So it is very interesting because this author, he advocates for being able to stop the distraction, go deep, and do something that means something, right? That will go beyond decades or 100 years after you're gone, to leave something of essence, of criticality to the world. So I think what that book also, if I remember correctly, it's been several months since I read the book, but it's all about also the sense of that type of real work, deep work, may require us going through a moment of loss, of crisis, of isolation, and removing from that silence that comes from being abducted, if you will. This is an allegory here, right? Being abducted from the context that you spend most of your life to another context, a context of silence, a context of this inner journey. And I love what you said, Jusada. This is probably the best time for us to think of what is it we can do that matter. Doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that you have or not have a salary, an income attached to it, but what can you do that really matters, so that you can be at ease without the trappings of material external validations and success, right?
And
So I
let us
think this
be
is, yeah.
reminded
Mhm.
that sometimes, even when I mentioned that, uh, we don't need to look for work or position outside
Yeah,
the home or even in
yeah,
an
yeah,
organization. Sometimes, even like you said, being a workaholic and being so much away from your family, it
yeah,
means now I can give more to them. I can focus
absolutely.
more on them. I don't
Yeah,
need to look outside to serve, to
yeah,
be more present. This is when sometimes, the grandparents were not as present as they wished in the life
yeah,
of their children, can be more present in the life of their grandchildren without
mhm,
taking over, of course. But I think the whole discussion here, the whole conversation is about, regardless of what moment you are in life, you have
yeah,
value, you have
yes,
worth, and you have something to give. You have a contribution to give. And if it's time for you to say goodbye to certain roles, to certain status, to titles that you have, go after, a new process of rediscovering, reinventing yourself. I
yes,
mean,
yes,
maybe you had something that you wanted to do when you're younger, but you never found the time to do it. Now you have the time. enjoy it, be productive, and remember that it is okay to go through this period of transition. I mean,
Yeah.
habits die hard, right? You wake up every morning, you brush your teeth, you go through rushing to your work, and all of a sudden you're there. Okay, the alarm is not ringing. What am I going
Yeah.
to do with all the hours of my day today?
Yeah.
It requires you being
Yeah.
patient with yourself,
Yeah.
patient with the process, um, and not getting into a dark phase of it that could be feeling alienated, feeling
Yeah.
unworthy, when this is a time as well to discover and to live and to go for new adventures.
Absolutely. I think we're at time, right? So maybe what we're talking here, everyone, is the required reframing, a spiritual reframing of that, of our sense of worth, right? And Joanna de Ângelis is a master in that because she reminds us that our so-called dignity is intrinsic, right? And if it's intrinsic, it absolutely does not come from my title, my office. One day I can talk to you in person about a whole story about an office. But how big is your office? How large is your salary? How many Oscars or any other types of equivalent? I'm not an actress, so no Oscars for me. But any type of public accolades, public recognition, because it is really all about what's inside within our consciousness. So it's really, I would say, let's think about how can you have similar sense of success by, I don't know, teaching someone, by comforting someone, by even without doing, but having a quiet life full of integrity. So I would just end my thoughts here, Jussara, with a proposal for us to shift. It's in this paradigm shift that will come to all of us, but to think about it, right? If we can shift from identity, our identity through a role, to become an identity through our consciousness. And yes, Josara, I can only tell you at the end of this journey, right? Because I am becoming what I can be. I'm not there yet. But shifting also from the classic how much or what do I produce to how many or how can I serve, as we mentioned about the servant leadership, right? From recognition to meaning. It's not outside in, it's inside out. What is no longer a need for status, but a need for wisdom. And again, finally, perhaps moving away from a sense of I've achieved into how much have I contributed. So we can see that this end of a cycle, professional, and that we're talking here, is really a beginning of a most beautiful, most authentic stage of our lives, right? Where we are there. It's time to be there. Jusada, shall I close today or?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much, for all the insights that you gave to us today. I think really from the audience point of view, um, we will all have so much to think about, and I think I mean sometimes it's not just about our personal learning, but how can we contribute
Yes.
with those new things, or with these thoughts, with everyone that is around us as well. We can be sharing those ideas with our friends, family that are going through the same phases of life, so that they can understand that it's okay, and they
Yeah,
will learn or you will cope better with this phase of life when the time comes. Thank you so much.
absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. I love this. So thank you for that. But if you're here with us today and you happen to stumble upon this podcast, I want to say this is actually, and I just had to mention, right? We are our fourth year, and psychology and spirituality are is a program with weekly talks, and you heard many different references, but we base our discussions on the works by Joanna de Ângelis, and it's such a pleasure to be able to be here to talk to you, Jussara, but also to understand how a single topic can go into many different aspects, right, in many different arenas, and it's always comforting to know that we are not alone, right? And it's okay. It's okay to mourn a part of our lives that it's ending with a role, a title, a job, whatever. Let us be brave because we, in the infinite mercy of God, we are not abandoned ever. But anyways, I wanted to take a moment to thank our sponsors, Mansão do Caminho, the United States Spiritist Federation, the International Spiritist Council, and AMI Brazil. And until next time, so long, Jussara, so long, everyone.
Bye.